Shalom, WJC family. It's time for our weekly Torah Talk. This week in synagogue, we'll be reading Parshat Shelach, or Shelach Lecha, which is all about, or mostly about, the sin of the scouts who were sent by Moses under the instruction of God to scout the land of Israel before what would presumably be the conquest. Why send these scouts? It seems like a risky mission. As we know, they come back and they give a terrible report that ultimately that lack of faith condemns the people to live in the desert for 40 years. That whole generation is going to die out. And only once they're gone can we go ahead and conquer the land under Joshua, much later, an older version, after Moses is gone, the same Joshua who fails to convince the people in this Parsha as one of the spies to have faith. So what is this story really about? Why send the spies at all? Obviously, if Moses has faith that God is going to march with them to conquer the land, you shouldn't need scouts at all. And what exactly is the sin of these scouts that condemns them to this terrible future? And the real question here is a question of truth. If the scouts come back and tell the truth, then what's wrong? That was their job. They gave their honest assessment, which begs a question: are the facts the same as the truth? In a scientific world, I think we do believe that fact and truth are the same thing, right? We think that history is made up of facts, and if you understand the facts, you can understand the history. Or that for scientific experiments, we find facts, measurements, and numbers, and if we have the right measurements and numbers, and we know what we're dealing with, and we know all the facts, then we have the truth. But this story seems to tell something different. So the first question, why send these scouts at all? Moses tells them that they should go into the land and they should find out, go up there into the Negev and on into the hill country and see what kind of country it is. Are the people who dwell there strong or weak, few or many? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Are they in towns? Are the towns they live in fortified? Is the soil rich or poor? Is it wooded or not? And take pains to bring back some of the fruit of the land. So the question is, what is this mission all about? And the Rashbam, one of the medieval commentators on the Torah, says, look, he just wants facts, strong or weak. All of Moses' questions, says the Rambam on that verse, strong or weak, all of Moses' questions are designed to elicit information that they would need to plan their campaign. Right? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Was the uninhabited stretch of country the Israelites would first enter? Now Moses speaks of the heartland good or bad. Is it full of enough crops that we will not have to prepare many supplies in advance? Are the towns fortified? Is the verse. Rashbam says, are we going to need siege equipment to take the cities, right? So this is simple. Moses just wants the facts, right? Moses just wants to know what the land is like so that they can plan this, this conquest. That's the truth. It's going to be easy to capture their cities, or we're going to need siege engines to capture their cities. It's going to be easy to eat off the fat of the land, or we're going to need to bring supplies with us, and so on and so forth. So that's the question, and Rambam, that according at least to Rashbam, that Moses is trying to glean and discover. However, when they come back, they give a report that doesn't necessarily seem to comport with the facts. They give all those facts, and then they say, however, the Nephilim live there, this race of giants, and we can't possibly conquer them. We felt like grasshoppers next to them, and so we must have appeared in their eyes. Now, that was also factually correct, right? They felt like grasshoppers in the eyes of these people. That is a fact. It is how they felt. Now, should they or shouldn't they have? I don't know. That's a deeper truth. But that seems to be their sin, right? As Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk puts it, what the scouts reported was factually correct, but it was not the truth. The truth is not necessarily as things appear, but stems from the depths of the heart, from the sources of one's faith. Truth and faith go hand in hand, and a person does not acquire truth easily and by a superficial glance. In other words, the spies took in the facts just fine. Maybe the people were exceptionally large. Maybe it would be a hard land to live off of. Maybe the fortifications seemed too great to be conquered. But the truth was something different, as the Bible goes on to tell. When Joshua comes to conquer the land 40 years later, the people follow him, and in the end, we're told that the Canaanites just melt away before the armies of the Israelites. They're not hard to conquer at all. They come across the walled cities like Jericho, and famously all they have to do is march around it 7 times, blowing shofars, and the walls come tumbling down, right? The appearances were facts, but the truth was something different, because the truth combines not only the facts, but also the imagination, the creativity, the sense of faith, the sense of belief. And by the way, that is true in science and other fields as well, and it's worth being appreciated, right? Meaning that facts can point in many different directions, and it takes creative thinking, and it takes belief it takes imagination to actually take those facts and come up with a theory, a hypothesis that can then be tested. And we see that time and again in science. For example, I use science because that is the most common way that we think in our world today, I think. But we could say the same thing about history. We could say the same thing about other fields, right? That it's never just the facts, right? Famously, I date myself a little, but Sergeant Friday in Dragnet would say, "Just the facts, ma'am." But if you just have the facts, you have to put those together into a theory of how the crime was done. That's imagination. That's creativity. That's storytelling. That's faith. That's belief in how people will behave and how the world works. It's never really just the facts that make up the truth. It's all of that. And it's also values. And it's also belief. And it's also imagination. It is in that area, I think, that we really come up with a sense of spirituality and faith. When we recognize just how much we are invested in the narrative that the facts tell. That a story that connects all those facts can lead in one direction or another, and both can be possible truths, and only will time and experimentation and following one of those paths ultimately tell us what the truth is. And not only that, depending on which path we follow, we help create that truth. Ultimately, that is the task of religious people. That is the task of spiritual people. Whether they like it or not, I think it's the task of everyone. We are creating the truth in the world, not the facts. The facts are the facts. But truth is something that we create by how we behave, the stories we tell, the path we follow, who we bring along with us and who we reject, and what we bring along with us and what we reject, by the values that we follow and the beliefs that we hold dear. All of that creates the truth, or at least a truth, at least our truth. That is a conscious journey, and the failure of the spies, the failure of the Miraglim, the scouts of the land, is that they fail to see their own control over the truth and ultimately create the wrong truth, take the people down the wrong path, towards a negative path, one that damns them all to die in the desert until a new generation can come forth and take advantage of the great promise and the great gift and the other truths that God has promised them. That same choice is before us every day. I pray, as we turn to the Shabbat, where we will read Shelach Lecha, that we are able to embrace the right truths, the ones that will lead us down a positive path, a path towards tikkun, towards making the world better, a path towards understanding each other, a path towards sharing a better world with more people, and ultimately a path filled with purpose and meaning for ourselves. Wish you a Shabbat Shalom.